Today I'm going to be replacing the fuel sending unit on my 1989 Ski Nautique 2001. My fuel gauge doesn't seem to be working. I have already done all the troubleshooting to find out that my sending unit is bad. But there's the ignition on and it goes to there, and I know I have more than an empty tank. Here we are at the back of the boat and going to get to the access for the gas tank. Have to remove the seat, bottom. Okay, just slides out. Set that off to the side, like so. And then the back just folds forward on some hinges. There should be a strap. Mine ripped on the top, but on the bottom. Pull it out. And we will set that off to the side with the seat, thus exposing the gas tank. And there you can see, in the middle, the sending unit. A quick and simple way to see if the wiring is good from the sending unit up to the fuel gauge is what I did was I took off this wire and directly touched it to these wires, and if the fuel gauge needle moves all the way to full, then the wiring should be confirmed that it is good. I have the wire disconnected and just touch it to the ground. And you can see from, it's going to be really hard to see, but you can see the needle moving. So that, from my understanding, confirms that the wiring is good and that the problem then lies with the sending unit itself. Now, since the sending unit kit that I purchased is somewhat of a universal kit for Nautique boats, the rod has to be cut and measured for the depth of the tank. So, take your tape measure and measure. And it appears that my tank is about 10.5 inches deep. So we have to cut and bend the rod for a fuel tank depth that works for 10.5 inches. Here we have the instructions on the length to cut the rod. So it says distance from rod end or end of wire to float rod 90-degree bend point. Okay, so we come down here to, there it says 10.5. We come across and it looks like the length of the rod needs to be 6 3/4 inches. So for a tank depth of 10.5 inches, we need a rod length of 6 3/4 inches. And according to the directions, you take it from the pivot point to the end. And what I'm gathering, also it tells you that you get basically a 1/2 inch of leeway for your measurements. So what I'm thinking is, I've got it kind of propped up here on how it's going to be in the tank. So we're going to take it from that pivot point down there. It's hard to See, but where the wire rod bends, it hooks in 6 3/4 from there out. And I believe it ends up sitting like this. So I'll make the bend for the float to sit like that as opposed to like this, because I think it makes more sense in the tank. If it sits like this, it's not going to be as accurate as if it were sitting like this in the tank. That's what makes sense to me. So we're going to measure it from 6 3/4 to that bend. So wherever you make the mark, that's where the bend is going to happen. Then you need to have the length to go that way, then you can trim it afterwards. So you'll mark it for whatever measurement you need, make the mark, bend it at that mark. So this is just one long end going that way, or whichever way, and then cut it to where it just barely sticks out the end of this, I'm guessing. Now I have the rod laid out on the table with the tape measure, and you can see from that end to 6 3/4 I've made a mark. Now that is where I will make the bend. I have the rod secured in the vise, and it's about as close as parallel to how it's going to be in the gas tank as I think I can get it. Pretty close. And I have it, focus, where the mark is right there on the vise, just inside. So when I make the bend, hopefully it'll be pretty darn close. Like I said, there's a 1/2 inch of leeway or so. And this should get it to where I want. And here is what I'm thinking it is supposed to look like. So as you can see, it's pretty close to the 6 3/4. It looks like it ended up being an 1/8 inch off, but pretty close. I think it'll be alright. Now we got to put the float on, see what it looks like, and then trim it down to size. This is basically how it's going to be. And the directions are talking about cutting and crimping process to be done prior to float assembly. Now my old float in the boat fell off, and I want to make sure that doesn't happen again. So what I'm thinking of doing is I made a mark, and I'm going to try and bend it up, yeah, about there. So just need a slight bend just to keep it from sliding off. So I think I'm going to put a slight bend into it, that way it won't fall off, and then cut it. So that should take care of it. And here is going to be my final result. Bent there. As you can see, I put a slight bend on this side so the float does not have a chance to fall off. I ended up cutting the end of it just with a hacksaw I picked up from Menards, and then used channel locks to make a slight bend. Next will be to install it in the boat. Here we are back in the boat, and I'm getting ready to install the new standing unit. This little gear wrench kit that I picked up at Menards is pretty awesome. Double-ended. Just put whatever end you need into it. Pretty tight teeth pattern, and you can work in tight spaces like this. I mean, there's only I don't know, maybe 6 inches or so to work in. So here we go, gonna take out the old fuel sending unit. I have all the screws loose. One thing you want to be certain of is when you go to take the sending unit back out, is any debris you wipe away. Now I've already taken this out once to do some diagnostic work on it before to see what was the problem. So I've already cleaned out the area. But here I'm gonna take out the old one and I'll show you what the old one looks like compared to the new one. Here we have the old sending unit compared to the new one. As you can see, the old one is just a straight rod, and no wonder the float fell off, which is why I put that bend in it. So now it shouldn't fall off. If it fails, it fails, but it won't be because the float fell off. Alright, the new sending unit is installed. It is a simple 5-bolt pattern, and there is only one way that this thing can go in. So when I was originally putting it in, I was having the float facing that way, and it would not bolt into place. So rotated it, and I had the float going the opposite way, and it bolted in just fine. So new gasket installed, wire installed. Now we see if it works. And we have success. About a quarter tank of gas. I have owned this boat for about 3 years and never had a working fuel gauge, and it was something that simple. 1 wire, 5 bolts, a little bit of bending and measuring, and we now know how much gas we have in the boat. This is awesome. I hope this video helps anybody else that has to do something similar. This should be very similar to other boats or even old vehicles, things like that. So thank you for watching.